the culprit, she was the one to blame. But in this silly town, where mischief's all around, Jodi's little tale became quite renowned. It's Jodi Day, it's Jodi Arias Day. Come along and join us in our playful little play. But remember, my friend, that the truth will always win in this town of make-believe, where the fun begins.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Jodi Day. Hey. Well, and you might know, no, this is weird. As you know, might see, just me here. Yeah, Dave's not here. Dave's not here. Where's Dave? Dave! Yeah, he can't make it. He had plans with family. It is Saturday, but I do have some idea of what he's doing. Oh, well, welcome to. Well, this won't be a one-man show. I have a replacement. That replacement will show up eventually. That person is currently grocery shopping, but will join us as soon as she can. As soon as she can. So, hello, everybody. Dave's not home. Nope. Hello, Elise, Dave, Erin, Jedi, Dolly is here, and a bunch of other people. Hello, Vicky, and DK Cripple was first. No, I am not the bad. This is my newly built office place in my house, but I still haven't had time to put up the sound thingies, so you will it's an echo in here, so bear with it. Yeah, well, I'm sure you can. Hey, Cat, popping in from work to say, don't forget about Hella stream tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern time. I will not forget. Hella, it's her birthday. She will have a birthday stream tonight, so nobody forget about that. Later today, I will hold my Serial Killer Saturday stream, and from that, I will redirect you all over to Hella, to Excited Utterance. Okay, so where are we in the Jodi Arias trial? We are at the final witnesses, and we have started on day 54. This is part 3. It is the defense rebuttal, and they have brought on Dr. Kafuffle. No, what's his face? Dr. Gaffner. Dr. Gaffner and nothing else. Not what I said. So here she is, Jodi Arias, the woman that Sal says he can fix. He can fix. So this is what we are going to watch, because they have interviewed him. Then they have, well, first direct, then cross. Now it's redirect, I believe. So yeah, so let's just finish this off. And here we go. And it's a sidebar. There we go.
You may continue.
The question is, first, isn't it true that this profile
is consistent with borderline personality disorder. And by this profile, I'm talking about exhibit number 631. Yes or no?
Oh, I think this is read.
No, that's not the way it would be used.
Take a look at exhibit 650 and start with a paragraph that reads, unfortunately. Take a look at that.
Do you want me to read the entire page?
I want you to read that paragraph, and and once you've read that paragraph, let me know.
Yeah. Yeah. I assume this might be Brandon. Or it might be somebody else. I don't know. It's not the MLS, we are searching for.
Yes, sir.
May I have it back, please?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, hit
Doesn't
the
that
right button on
indicate
both
that this
screens.
profile is consistent with borderline personality disorder?
Again, just to be clear, you're talking about the one we have on the screen?
Right. Mhm.
No, it actually does not.
What do you think it says, sir?
It says for those who have F scales above 96 and F either P or B above 80 or 90 and elevated scales in the other regions are what they're referring to, which doesn't apply to this.
Are you saying that this individual doesn't have an elevated F scale?
No,
Yeah?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It does, doesn't it?
It does have an elevated F scale, not at the level you just had me read.
And with regard to this particular profile, one of the things that you have to worry about is malingering, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And malingering involves secondary gain, right?
It can.
And what is your definition of secondary gain?
Somebody,
Rebuttal.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Okay. Secondary gain usually means that somebody is doing something because there's some benefit to them. It could be monetary, it could be social, it could be whatever. It means they have something to gain by how they end up responding.
And a person who is in jail charged with a very serious crime has something to gain, don't they?
Yes, sir.
And in this particular case, the something to gain can be this over-reporting that we have here on the right side, correct?
It could be.
In other words, what this is indicating is that this person is exhibiting too many symptoms, right? That's one of the dangers of this, right?
Well, you just said dangers of.
One of the things that indicates here is that these are too many. This person is exhibiting too many symptoms such that malingering is something to consider, right?
It's partially right. Yes, it's malingering is something to consider. The word too many is not appropriate. It's that they're exhibiting many symptoms, and malingering then should be considered.
All right. How many symptoms are we talking about here that are over the threshold? HS is what?
Hypochondriasis.
That's not over the threshold, correct?
Correct.
D is what?
Depression.
That's over the threshold, right?
Yes, sir.
HY is what?
Hysteria.
Is that over the threshold?
Yes, sir.
How about what's PD?
It stands for
You
psychopathic.
keep reading something. Aren't you an expert in this thing?
I was just following to make sure I could
Why
not
don't you
see.
look at the screen if you don't mind?
But I can't read the screen you have.
Well, then
up.
I'll bring it up.
If you could put it down, then I can see which scales you're referring to.
I'm asking you.
Well, isn't the prosecutor being a real bee? And speaking, my co-host is here. Hello, Mo.
Hello. I'm okay with being a bee. You know, I'm going to say I'm going to say that I might have been when I was treated to the optical absurdity of a young man in booty shorts and a crop tank top that was flesh toned out at Aldi.
Oh. I'm so sorry.
Well, I actually felt bad. I was like, he has no cellulite. God, punish him.
Oh. Ah. No, my serial killer is now Saturdays because I need one day off a week from streaming and videos and stuff.
I understand that. Although tomorrow I will be, I'm not sure exactly what time, but I will be doing a dramatic reading of Sarah Boone's latest. Well, I don't know if it's a dissertation or a treaty on. I'm not sure that her constitutional scholarship is on par with. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I read a bit. I read the first 7 pages yesterday on my celebration stream. She has very high thoughts of herself, which is kind of bothering because if she was that smart, beautiful, and everything that she believes she is, why did she end up where she ended up?
Because everyone's against her, Nicholas. We just can't stand in the light of her brilliance. It burns me, and I'm really pale. So I imagine maybe if I were able to tan, I could stand next to her and her radiance. But
I had some words about my thoughts about her ability to evaluate her own situation, and I think she's enjoying herself for the attention she gets, which to a level she has never gotten from anybody before.
I do wonder, and I'm going to have to ask her as I represent her, was the letter from Korea from North or South? Like, I enjoy living in North Korea more than I would enjoy being your cellmate. I mean,
yeah.
Or was it, Kim Jong-il isn't that bad. I've met you.
Well,
I mean, there's just so many things.
I would rather have lunch with Kim Jong-il, or whatever his name is, than Sarah Boone. As a matter of fact, I might even consider having lunch with Idi Amin or Mussolini before Sarah Boone.
I mean, at least Mussolini got the trains going on time. Sarah, the guy from WW2 got the Autobahn build. Sarah committed a suitcasing. I mean,
yeah.
We should probably get back to Jodi, or we'll just spend the entire time making fun of Sarah. It'll be 3 hours, and people will be like, I was told we were gonna have Jodi time.
Yeah. Now this is recross of this Dr. Gaufner, and I think it's very unnecessary what the prosecution is doing. Oh, look at that. Thank you so much. FMM 2.0 for $20. Thank you. Happy Saturday. Hope to see you all at Hella's birthday stream later. Yep.
Yes, I will try to make an appearance.
Nice.
Now, was this a defense expert? I missed the last week, so.
Yes, this is the doctor, very experienced, very good credentials that the defense used to miscredit the state's expert. With small result. Nick Sean said he was sorry and felt bad about the young thug stream and hope you guys can collab soon on future updates. Oh, definitely. Me and Sean on the same stream, we have a lot of fun. And he is very, very knowledgeable. So I would collab with him any day of the week, especially on the Young Thug, because as you know, I've been covering that case for over a year, and it gets a bit lonely.
I've been, summers are terrible for me to plan much more than to be on a second stream. And the boys have decided they don't like each other, even though I biomechanically made someone that could possibly, give them a kidney or a liver. My craftsmanship is like, he's annoying and irritating. And I'm like, well, I can't return him to sender. What would you like me to do about that? I'm like, be nice to your brother. You might have to get a liver one day. And yes, those words have come out of my mouth while shouting because they have just pushed me over the limit. I was like, I bioengineered people for you to play with. I can't do more than what I've already done.
Well, Jodi Arias.
Yes.
Question, sir.
Okay.
PD, what does PD stand for?
Approach.
Hi, Bar.
Now, I will say that prosecutors that are fairly aggressive or show that on cross, it's a bad look. We're seeing that with Lolly right now. And if you have a good grasp of the information, you can understand it, or you have gotten experts that can explain it to you in a way that you can understand it. You can ask pointed questions without coming off as a douchebag.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it in the Eileen Warner's trial, the prosecutor there. Jesus, he is ruthless, but in a good way. And I've seen it in other trials as well. When the prosecutor has a good case, they don't need to shout about it. They let the evidence speak for itself. For instance, we have the Florida double murder death penalty case, which I almost began covering. Then the Young Thug thing blew up. So
yes.
So next week I will be watching that trial in reverse. Same thing I did with the OnlyFans stalker trial. We begin with the sentence, or with the guilty, not guilty, and move backward.
I think that's a really good idea, because I think you pay more attention to what it is that the jury, and I think that's also something I'm learning, is that, for a long time, I didn't feel maybe as authentic commenting on trials because I don't have a law degree, but I also see things in a way that I would think jurors would see them. So where lawyers might say, oh, well, that wasn't a strong witness, I can come in and say, you know what? They seemed like they had a really good grasp on their particular, thing. They came off as very authentic, not trying to obfuscate the truth. So it is good to have both of those opinions, I think.
Yeah, it is. And now, one of the reasons why I can't do this next week is because in the Young Thug trial, they are now arguing about, will the prosecution be allowed to play all 15 hours of interrogation videos plus additional hours of jailhouse calls, unredacted or with redaction. So the judge took 2 weeks off for the prosecution and the defense to agree on what to play and what not to play. The Young Thug trial has a 2 week off. Hopefully, the Georgia Supreme Court can take the writ of mandamus during that time.
Yeah.
And throw that damn judge off the bench.
Yeah, there are a lot of judges that, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to read through the, I want to say, 27-page rebuttal to Judge Gull, again, continuing to use demonstratively degrading verbiage to the state or to the defense and just every single thing that she has done. And I think most egregious is this report that just came out, wherein she claims that the, Carroll County Sheriff's Office, lied on her, but she's had access to this report. And yeah, it's just, bring clean cases, and I won't have so much to say about you.
Yeah, and maybe go back to this now Florida double murder case. Do you know how long that trial was?
Wasn't it like 4 or 5 days? 3.
3 days. 3 days for double.
Yeah.
That's when you have a case. The trial isn't long when you have a good case. Now, this is a very intricate case, which must take longer because she kept lying. But I'm with Dave on this, that Angry Elf won this trial despite him, not because of him.
Yeah, I think he was...
The evidence in this trial are staggeringly against Jodi Arias.
Yeah, that's the thing. He could have gone through all of the material evidence and then spent a good bit of time on, Jodi and having her on the stage or on the stand. Well, stage is probably apropos here, but he seemed to... This is what I don't get about lawyers. When you have someone on the stand and you try to ask a question several times and they are not going to give you the answer that you want, and you have all of the rest of this evidence, I don't understand why you continue to poke at that.
I really can't. I don't do trials, so I can't answer that. I do mostly negotiations and evaluations if it is a case for the union or not. Accident, deliberate actions, stuff like that. But for instance, earlier this week, or was it
You're
last
like,
week?
what day is today? Where am I?
Yeah,
I
had 2.5 days of intense negotiations where I had to zoom in.
Yes.
And of course, it's the week when everything happens in the Young Thug trial. I had to momentarily step outside of the role and back in. But as my SO says, when I am in that zone, she don't want to meet me. She don't want to see me because it's a totally different person.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I can't say how I would have acted in a trial against.
I guess the biggest example is probably Lolly for how terribly he did with the very sweet Santa Claus looking computer man. And the computer man was so self-effacingly Midwestern. It was just, he's like, I am so sorry if I caused you distress. I did further research. And Lolly's like, you didn't distress me. That's not the question. And I'm like, Jesus, take the butt plug out of your behind if it's too big. Apply more Astroglide and settle the hell down. Lolly.
That witness killed Lally with kindness.
I know.
The angrier Lally got, the nicer the witness got.
I know. I still don't understand anything about the computers and or cell phones. That was a time suck that I think was stupid, given that it is the Karen Reed case. I give two craps about, other than the fact that it does look suspicious that she had these. We have spent now 4 witnesses going over this. And I still don't know how the man managed to do a flying, leap, hit his head, but also hit his temples. But it's all from a car wreck.
Yeah, hit his right arm. The arm managed to get dragged with the car during the marks. My instinct here, because I've been doing labor law for over 30 years. I've seen some horrific accidents. what he is describing is simply not physically possible. It's against the fundamental laws of physics. If you get hit anywhere, what happens is kaboom, arm goes like this. It doesn't stay there. We are not stationary like a crash test dummy. Not even a crash test dummy is stationary, by the way.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is I know Bev doesn't like demonstratives, but at the end of Lolly's case, I should have a clear picture of what the state believes.
Yeah.
And thus far, I have, well, they had a fight. She sent him some nasty text messages, which let Mr. Mo forget his cell phone when I am trying to converse with him. Because I will leave him messages like, well, I'll just go ahead and get a can with some strings since apparently we aren't using cell phones for communication. The raging bee that I'm sorry, MLS, we will get back. We just haven't hung out in a while. Daggone.
Yeah.
Let us conversate like 13-year-old girls for a little bit. And conversate is an Indiana word. I hate it, but I have
this reminds me when me and Steve Gosney was watching the Eileen Warnes trial a few months ago. We got through 4 minutes of trial, and the rest hour and a half we were just talking.
Pretty well. That's what I tell everyone about Shizzy streams. I'm like, look, there is a 3% time period where we will be on task, and the rest, 85%, is trying to figure out where we got off task, and whatever percentage is left over is just pure shenanigans. So.
Yeah, and Patriotiak, hey, this trial, I mean, she does a good job, but she also have a few questionable decisions. I would say that. But the only reason I know that is because of what the appeals court said about this trial. If I had no idea what the appeals court said about this trial, I would have mimicked your comment. Yeah, she's doing a great job.
Okay, let's get back to the actual trial before people start rioting and getting pitchforks.
Sir, what does PD stand for?
The technical terms are psychopathic deviant.
And what does that mean?
What does that mean, or what does that scale mean?
What does it mean?
The scale by itself is usually referring to impulsivity or acting impulsively. Could be rebellion against authority figures. It could have to do with antisocial behaviors. All those things would form that scale.
And what does MF stand for?
It generally stands for masculinity, femininity.
And PA, what does that stand for?
Paranoia.
PT, what is that?
Psychoasthenia.
And what is that?
It's usually an oversensitivity, emotional reaction, those types of things. Sensitive to criticism, all those would go into that scale.
I did not know that was a psychiatric term. That kind of reminds me of my sisters.
It doesn't.
With criticism,
yeah,
emotional.
So he's just saying being a lady now.
I didn't say it. I didn't say it.
I have the card having sweater puppies. I can comment, and absolutely, some days our hormones are like, hey, you had a dream of your significant other or Mr. Mo cheating. This didn't happen in reality, but you're still pissed off at him, so warn him.
Oh.
And SC, what does that stand for?
Officially, schizophrenia.
I'm sorry?
Schizophrenia, officially.
And what is schizophrenia?
It's a psychotic disorder, meaning somebody has lost touch with reality. That's what the definition means. The scale is separate. But the definition usually means somebody who is psychotic and lost touch in one way or another with reality, maybe hallucinating or having delusions.
And in this case, when we have that, that's elevated here, isn't it? You see that?
Yes, sir, it is.
What does MA stand for?
Mania.
And what is mania?
excessive energy, manic means somebody high, not from drugs, high in energy, overactivity, all those things go into that scale.
And all of these responses that we have here were responses that were provided by the defendant, as far as you know, correct?
Correct.
Judge, if we could take a break like we discussed.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take a 10-minute recess. Be back at, this
Luckily-
clock says 3:05, so let's sync.
Luckily, Wilhelm Media, all the breaks are edited out. Thank you to Wilhelm Media.
Yes.
Everybody go subscribe to Wilhelm Media.
Absolutely.
No.
He does
If
all
you
of the
are-
magic to make.
If you in chat or anybody watching, if you think if these two can do it, so can I. Wilhelm Media has a bunch of trials for you to start with,
Absolutely.
where you can practice with, so to speak, before you maybe go to a real current one. So hopefully he will get monetized soon, because he has all the numbers, but YouTube says, no, you don't provide enough things. His reply apparently was, I have edited all of this and made sound much better. I've done tons of work. I just don't talk in it.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I know that Dave isn't monetized yet on his new channel, because YouTube says this content is not what we want to monetize. And I'm like, have you seen the law tubes explode the last 4 years? I mean, seriously? Yeah. People want this content, because it's one thing to watch a trial. Sometimes you have questions.
Absolutely.
Here we are.
And and when you first start with, watching trials, maybe you start out a little Pollyanna and you think the state would never bring a case they couldn't prove. And then you start watching these trials and you're like, wait a minute, no one had questions about this, that, and the other. And yes, Amy Dennis, I have heard of the Stacey Castor trial. That woman is just absolutely dumpster water human being. But yeah, the prosecutor in that case was fantastic. Look, I'm a fan of lawyers that let you know when they feel like the person that they are seeing and they agree with me is a dumpster fire of a human. I like when they let that show. There is a Groves trial set of videos on my case, and it's a hard case to watch, but I basically did it for the interesting legal theory, and then the prosecutor having no problems showing she thinks of these two humans as dumpster trash. So I understand the professionalism, and this judge has done well kind of keeping the lawyers on task, and even trying to keep the little elf guy, at least from getting too pixie sticked. Yeah. So
Synchronize our watches. So at 3:10, please be ready to come back into the courtroom. Remember the admonition, you are excused.
Remember the admonition?
Well, probably like, don't look things up, don't go to talk to each other.
You may continue cross-examination.
Sir, one of the things that you told me was that this was not suggestive to you of borderline personality disorder, correct? That's what you told me, right?
I said you could not use this scale to diagnose borderline, correct?
No, I'm asking you whether or not this is indicative of borderline personality disorder.
No, it is not.
I want you to take a look at another exhibit then.
Yes, sir.
Sir, are you familiar with somebody by the name of Timothy J. Troll?
No, not personally.
Are you familiar with the Psychological Assessment, a journal of consulting and clinical psychology?
Yes, somewhat.
And with regard to Are you familiar with a article entitled Discriminant Validity of the MMPI Borderline Personality Disorder Scale?
Not off the top of my head.
Well, why don't you go ahead and take a look at page number 234 and take a look at table 2 that's at the bottom of that article.
Yes, sir.
You may.
Table 2 that's at the bottom of that article.
Yes, sir.
You may.
Oh, how about that? I mean, this trial, I must admit, have more sidebars per day than the Young Thug trial. But we passed 200 sidebars in the Young Thug trial a while ago. We are approaching day 100 on the Young Thug trial, and possibly it interacts with sidebar number 250. So we are halfway to, I believe, the most sidebars I've heard of is in the O.J. Simpson trial, which had almost 490 sidebars during the trial.
Oh, dear Lord.
Yeah. But the Young Thug trial is scheduled, it's unless the Georgia Supreme Court says otherwise, that trial will end somewhere in the next year.
You just wanted me to be basically familiar with it, not read the entire article, I assume.
Right.
Yes, sir.
All right, if I may have that.
Yes, sir.
This has a table number 2, involving the K-corrected MMPI inventory T-scores, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
And what does K-corrected mean to you?
It's actually correcting the profile of certain scales based on the level of defensiveness, the K scale that the person had.
And in fact, it's taught, you keep looking down. Are you looking at something else?
No, I'm looking at the same thing.
And sir, this talks about the MMPI, and it involves scores for borderline personality disorder, right?
Yes, sir.
Major depression, right?
Yes, sir.
Dysthymia, right?
Dysthymia.
And it involves scores for borderline personality disorder, right?
Yes, sir.
Major depression, right?
Yes, sir.
Dysthymia, right?
Dysthymia.
Dysthymia, right?
Yes, sir.
Bipolar disorder, right?
Yes, sir.
And cyclothymia, right?
I believe so, yes.
Pardon?
I believe so.
And schizophrenia, right?
Yes, sir.
And also schizoaffective disorder and diagnostic groups, right?
I believe.
And then it looked at these scales that we're looking at here, correct?
Yes, sir.
It looked at the F scale, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in this article, the F scale was elevated, right?
You mean the average you're talking about there?
Well, yes. The
Yes.
average F score was elevated, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, we have an elevated score here, correct?
I would need to do one more thing. I think that may be on the MMPI 1, so they're different scales. I'd have to, if I could look at that for a second, I just need to
Well,
know.
I'm asking you whether or not this is an elevated score, sir.
Yes, this is elevated, but there's two different things.
I understand. So is this an elevated F score,
This one, correct, is.
right? And with regard to number 2, which you told me was what?
Number 2.
Right here, 1, 2,
Oh,
3,
scale 2,
right?
depression.
And with regard to depression, this is elevated, correct?
Objection. Just a reapproach.
Yes, you may approach.
How about that? Another sidebar.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, I think she probably has histrionic personality disorder, but from what I've seen, I mean, I'm no psychologist or head shrink, but she does display borderline personality disorder traits that we learned of from not Dr. Spiegel, but Dr. Muffin Mom from Amber Heard.
Yeah. I mean, me and Dave said she's this Jodi Arias is the original Amber Heard. And if Johnny Depp wasn't as rich, famous, and had that much security around him, he might have ended up like Travis. I'm not even saying that as a joke, actually, because
No, the thing is, I mean, these either end like Courtney Clenny or you have a stalker. I mean, to extricate yourself from one of these people is, I mean, you basically have to change your name, dye your hair.
And we have this elevation here under the D portion, correct?
Yes, sir.
F is not elevated. That's male, female, right?
Doctor, is the D elevated?
Well, I mean, he has personal experience having dangly bits. I'm sure he would be able to explain it. I feel happy that this poor court reporter who has had to listen to the most awful phone smecks that you ever heard in your entire life. You know, he seems to have survived, because this poor man looked like he was about to have a heart attack when we were talking about all the backdoor fun that Jodi had.
Yeah, that poor man I hope he got a free therapist after this trial, because he say what now? I have to write this down.
What kind of lube and or olive oil was used? What now? Just goes home and he prays at night.
She had a lube of her preferred choice with her.
Masculinity, femininity.
PA is elevated, right?
Yes, sir.
PT is elevated, right?
Yes, sir.
And SC is elevated, right?
Yes, sir.
And so is the MA, right?
Correct.
One of the things or the issues that you raised was, well, this study refers to the MMPI-1, right?
I didn't know. I needed to refresh my memory.
Well, assuming it does refer to the MMPI-1, correct? Let's assume it does refer to that. You're saying that just because it refers to the MMPI-1, it has no application to this particular scale at all?
No, the score, the reason I was asking it is you see this has a cutoff of 65, but the MMPI-1 had a cutoff of 70. So whether it's clinically elevated, which was I was trying to ask on the article, I had to go back and look compared to 70 rather than 65.
Okay. So I want you to take a look at and see whether or not the numerical scales are above 70. That's what you're asking about, right?
Correct. Yes, all the ones that you had highlighted are above 70. Or 70 or above.
Correct. Which makes this a valid study to look at, even though we are now doing MMPI-2, right?
Yes.
And this indicates that of 61 people that had borderline isn't it true that of the 61 people that were diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, every one of them had the identical or similar profile that we have here that we've been talking about?
No, sir.
Well, the F scale is 72.77 on this exhibit, isn't it? 651.
Yes, sir.
What is the F number for the defendant in exhibit number 631?
Wait, psychology has an
79.
FAO graph? Because I would like to have clinical tests of all of people around me.
Yes.
So this F scale is above the clinical threshold of 70 that you talked about, right?
Yes, sir.
With regard to the number 2, the D, which is depression, correct?
Yes, sir.
The level here on the...
Now talking about the D and number 2 in this trial.
Well,
the jokes write themselves sometimes, folks.
Yeah, that was a slow pitch. I was going to let it go.
Okay. My humor stopped developed when I was around 14.
Same.
I mean, it peaked at 14, and I have no reason to develop it any further.
No. If I want to feel smart, I'll watch Ricky Gervais or something.
Yep.
80.43, right?
Yes, sir.
That's above the 70 cutoff line, right?
That is correct.
And then number 3, which is the HY, isn't it true that in this study it was 70.05?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, sir.
That's above the 70
Well,
marker,
that's
right?
at 70, that's still clinical.
But it's still clinical. Number 4, which was the PD, right?
Yes, sir.
That was at 79.75, right?
Yes, sir.
Number 6 was 73.15, right?
Well, I am actually assuming you're reading it, so I'm not gonna, I'm assuming you're reading
Okay,
me the same
sure.
number, so I
I
would say
understand.
yes.
And number 7 was 72.34, right? Assuming I'm reading it correctly.
Yes, sir.
And number 8 was 79.20, right?
Yes, sir.
So if we assume that the cutoff is 70, the threshold on the F scale is met, correct? To be clinical, right?
Yes, sir.
The scales on the others, that we just talked about, are also clinical because they're above 70, right?
Yes, sir. Or
So-
at or above.
And this study indicates that those that we just talked about are also clinical because they're above 70, right?
Yes, sir. Or
So-
at or above.
And this study indicates that those with borderline personality disorder had that type of graph, for lack of a better term. Yes or no?
Can't answer that yes or no because you're
Okay, then
asking.
thank you.
Okay.
Sir, with regard to the, one of the other items that you talked about was
He is so
I mean,
angry.
now the cross-examination, once it calmed down, I'm assuming that the judge told him to stop shouting. He's doing quite good. I mean, look at
Yeah.
this point. You said it's not possible to do that, but look at this, and that. And according to this study, it shows this, and that. Excellent.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I like, sassy prosecutors and or defense, I much rather have just the facts. That's what you're supposed to be showing me, whatever they are. And then I am supposed to interpret them as a potential juror or just a regular person. I don't need what you think about this. I need to understand what facts that led you to charge what you did.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, this has nothing to do with this trial, but I'm sending it to you in the private chat because somebody has done a 3D rendering about what Trooper Paul testified to.
Oh dear
How
God.
he explained.
I can only imagine that I will
Yeah.
start laughing my boobs off when I do watch this.
Yeah. I haven't watched it, but I saw Legal Bites on Twitter commenting on it, so I thought, oh, I'm going to send this to Mo.
Awesome.
this trauma symptom inventory test. You remember talking about that?
Yes, sir.
And you indicated that this was,
Define that as past, yes.
and do you know somebody by the name of John Breer, PhD?
Yes, sir.
He's actually the person that put it together, right?
Yes, sir.
And are you familiar with what his psychometric summary is in terms of applying the TSI to borderline personality disorder?
I don't recall that one. I'd have to look at
Pardon?
it. I don't recall that one. I'd have to look at it.
So what was your opinion previously that you gave us with regard to this TSI? You indicated previously that it was indicative of post-traumatic stress disorder rather than borderline personality disorder, correct?
I don't think I said it that strong, but that's a general idea.
That was the general idea that you left us with, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's take a look at this exhibit.
Okay, let's take a look at the exhibit. I'm looking at the exhibit.
And so that we know what we're talking about when we talk about the TSI, this is exhibit number 644. Do you remember that?
I didn't know the number, but I
This
know.
is it, right?
Yes, sir.
And this is the one that you indicated that, well, there were the summary scales on there that Dr. DeMarti did not include, right?
Yes, sir.
And you indicated that, sure, somebody, if they're hand scoring it, in your opinion, they should always have the summary scales attached to it, right?
Not in my opinion. It's provided in the manual how to score it.
So you believe that the manual indicates that even if you hand score it, that is something that you are required to do?
Required isn't the way that would be the correct terminology for any test. It would say that in order to use this test, here are the scales and here's how you devise the summary scales. I don't think somebody's going to say you're required to do anything on a test. You're given it to get information and here's the information you can get. So it's just not a terminology we would use.
Have you ever hand scored one of these?
Oh, yes.
When was the last time you did it?
Oh. Last time I probably hand scored a TSI would be probably about 8-10 years ago.
And at that time, you did the summary scales, right?
Yes, we did.
No, you keep saying we. Did you do it or did somebody else?
It would well, in all these settings, I've had staff, so I would train them how, and then they would do it for practice and to learn how.
And so it is your view that you're sure about this issue involving the summary scales as you are about everything else. In other words, that the person who put this test together indicates strongly that the summary scales should be created as part of giving this test, if you hand scoring it.
That's, again, language that doesn't make sense. No, I haven't talked to John specifically
No, I'm not
about,
asking you if you talked to John. I'm asking what your understanding is. Is it your belief, as you sit here today, that the people that put this test out, you didn't create it, right?
that's correct.
That the people who created this test are saying, if you hand score this test, you are required, strongly required, to also create, as part of this hand scoring, the summary scales.
No, I don't recall reading any statement that would be stated the way you just did.
Well, what is the statement that you recall that it says?
Just instructions on how to obtain the summary scores if you're hand scoring.
Right, but instructions are different than a recommendation. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, you don't get recommendations per se in instruction manuals. You get in the manuals instructions on how to use the test, how to score it, how to interpret it.
Right.
So I don't think it gives you like recommendations from
Right,
the
but what you're
standpoint.
saying is that there are instructions on how to prepare these summary scales, but that's what it says. That's what they are, instructions on how to do it, if you want to do it, right?
Well, if you leave out the last three words, if you want to do it, it just says, here's how you obtain these summary scales, and then it tells you how to interpret it.
But your view is that just because the instructions are there, it's bad work on the part of Janine DeMarte because she did not do the summary scales. That's what you told us, right?
No. Oh, shoot.
Go ahead and clean up, please.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was doing so well.
Aw, he's so
Aw.
sweet. And you're being a jerk to this man, sir.
Holding a glass of water can be so hard sometimes. It's in the mouth when you try to drink. Normally it's at the end of my streams after Brandon had paid off the entirety of the Wheel of Regrets. But yeah,
Oh,
I can
yes.
see this happening.
Could you repeat that
Go
again?
ahead and finish up. I understand you. We were talking about instructions
Yes, sir.
involving the TSI and the summary scales.
Yes, sir.
And what you're telling us is that what you remember from the manual is that there are instructions to this TSI that would tell the psychologist how to create these summary scales should they choose to do so.
Yeah, if they're hand scoring is what you're asking.
Right, if they're hand scoring it, because
Yes,
you
sir.
did this by computer, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what you're saying now, though, is that there is no specific language in those instructions that indicates that it is mandatory, now, though, is that there is no specific language in those instructions that indicates that it is mandatory on your part that Janine DeMarte did a bad job because she didn't do the summary scales was based on your view that it should be done, not on what the manual says.
You've asked me two questions in there. First, I never used the word bad, period. So,
Well, you were very glowing about Janine DeMarte's work? Is that what you're telling me?
no, I believe the word that was asked
No, were you glowing about Janine DeMarte's work?
was I.
Yeah, apparently this guy knows. Oh, not Janine DeMott, because she was the good one. But do you remember the defense female
Oh,
psychologist?
the angry male hater.
Yeah, he knows her. He has worked with her.
Well, and aren't there, I'm guessing there are professional ethics that frown on you calling another psychologist or psychiatrist a wackadoo. So
Yeah.
he's trying very hard to not comment on her professionality, because I think that could be seen as something defamatory. And he knows, since he has dangly bits, she will go after him with a vengeance.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And he's like, oh, hell no, you're not getting me into this, Keebler elf. I'm saying nothing of the sort. And you better keep my name out your mouth.
Yep.
Glowing?
Yes, were you praiseful? Did you praise her work on the stand?
Not that I can recall.
No, you actually criticized her work from the stand, right?
Some of it, yes.
And one of the things that you criticized from the stand involved a TSI, right?
Yes, sir.
And you criticized the fact that she did not have summary scales, right?
Only partially.
The answer is yes, you did criticize, didn't you? You said she should have done it, right?
I said two things. I said, yes, they are part of that, and yes, she should have known they were part of it. I didn't criticize her for not requiring to do it. I criticized part of it because she didn't evidently know they were there or understand what they were. That's the criticism.
How do you know that she didn't know what she needed to do? How do you know? Can you read mine, sir?
Objection argumentative.
Sir, you didn't speak to Janine DeMarte about it, did you?
No, sir.
You never asked her whether or not she knew about the supplementary scale, the summary scales, did you?
No, sir.
And in fact, you never saw anything in writing that indicated from her that said she didn't know, right?
Objection.
The summary scales, did you?
No, sir.
And in fact, you never saw anything in writing that indicated from her that said she didn't know, right?
Objection. May we approach?
Yes, you may approach.
It's a sidebar.
He's putting this man in an incredibly difficult spot. What he can say is, I didn't agree with how she utilized the test, and I feel like she didn't score it correctly because she didn't use this. I don't know what her level of comfort with these particular tests are.
You reviewed
That's not how best practices work, in my opinion.
Report, right?
Yes, sir.
Nowhere did it indicate in there that she didn't have any knowledge about this, that it was a requirement that this TSI have these summary scales, right?
There was no indication of anything about the summary scales in her report.
That's right. And just because there's no indication in there doesn't mean she's ignorant of it, does it?
No, sir, it does not.
You made that leap, didn't you?
No, sir.
Well, you made that leap based on what? You read her report, right?
Yes, sir.
And then you read the results to the TSI, right?
Yes, sir.
And those are the only things that were provided to you, according to you, involving this TSI and the summary scales, right?
Those are the only materials provided to me, not the only information provided to me.
And in any of those materials, did they provide any indication that Janine DeMarte was ignorant of this requirement that you believe?
Not the only information provided to me.
And in any of those materials, did they provide any indication that Janine DeMarte was ignorant of this requirement that you believe exists?
You keep saying requirement, and I never indicated it was required first. So no, there's no, I never used the term required. Word required is not used in any of the manuals. So that's
Okay.
the first.
Oh, that was the trap, because he did criticize her for not using a few of the tools, and now the prosecutor is making him say, well, it's not required. You don't have to do it. Oh, really? You don't have to? So what? Your criticism of her for not using it is invalid?
Yeah, I guess I don't see what the prosecutor is trying to get to here. I mean, commenting on someone else's work, you can say, well, the best practice standard I follow is this. I believe in my personal practice, this is the standards. It's not, maybe it's something that was fairly new, but it's also, what is he winning here? I mean, do you want him to be the expert that is correct? Or do you want him to say, look, I believe that this test was not done accurately because this is how I do it? It just, I don't understand what he's trying to get at. If he just wants to denigrate the other expert, then you would have him go into, why do you use these scales? Why do you feel that it's important to have these scales on? Basically have him trash mouth the other psychiatrist doesn't really prove any point to me.
There's a discussion about Juan Martinez in the chat. Juan Martinez is 5'4". He is the same height as the person the expert in the Murdoch case claimed was the real killer.
Ah, well, I mean, where was he? Were you in low country, sir?
First
Thank
part.
you.
The second part is, was I provided any materials that?
With regard to the summary scale, so that we know what we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
If we're talking about summary scales, aren't they just 3 readings, right? We're talking about 3 readings, right?
You'd have to define what you mean by
Well,
readings.
let me just show you Exhibit 646. Talking about 3 readings, right?
You'd have to define what you mean by
Well,
readings.
let me just show you Exhibit 646.
Yes, sir.
And count with me. 1, 2, 3, right?
Yeah, we don't call them readings, we call them scales.
Well, there are 3 areas that have a summary, right? They're called summary scales, areas or sites.
I don't know why this stream jumps around. It's not me.
Again, I don't know what he's trying to get here. That's my issue with this question. And as a lawyer or as a juror member, when you are wasting my time and I don't understand what you're trying to get out, other than, possibly denigrating someone else. I have already been here for like 700 years at this point in the trial. I will actively start writing personal attacks about you instead of, actual notes. So.
That the test addresses, correct?
Yes, sir.
You have 10 readings, correct?
Readings is not a good term. 10 scales, yes.
All right,
we do.
let's use the word, there's 10 scales that are reported, correct?
Yes, sir. Well, 10.
10 plus the validity scales.
Yes.
I understand.
Yes, sir.
But you have the 10 scales. And then you have these 3 scales to the right. Is that the word you want to use?
Thank you. Yes, sir.
And with regard to these 3 scales to the right, what they merely do is they summarize what those 10 scales are there, what those 10 scales say, right?
If you leave out the word merely, the answer would be yes.
So they do summarize what's here, right?
Yes, sir.
In other words, what you're saying is somebody can take a look at this, which is the full scales, right? These are the full scales, right?
Yes.
And this is sort of the shortcut scales, right?
Again, shortcut is not a good term.
I understand it's not a shortcut, but the term summary means it's not the whole thing, doesn't it?
It means it's based on a compilation of other things.
But if someone as experienced as you is a clinical psychologist or is an expert in this, to be honest, you don't really need these summary scales. You're way too smart for that, right?
Objection argument.
Sir, you can do it. You've had how many years of experience in this?
In trauma or in this
No,
test?
no, no. Total experience in the field of psychology.
35.
And in those 35 years, you've dealt with this TSI test, haven't you?
No, the TSI was produced probably in the research version a little over 20 years ago.
So you've dealt with this for many years, right?
That is correct.
Whether it's the TSI-1 or the TSI-2, you've dealt with it for, what, 20 years?
Yeah, long time.
And in those 20 years, you've given this test many times.
Yes, sir.
And many times you've been able to take a look at all of these scales here, 1 through 10, whatever they are, and you know what they mean, right?
Yes, sir.
So you're saying that you need the summary to be able to tell you what these scales mean?
No.
Thank you.
Scale. Okay.
Now, with regard to the this trauma symptom inventory, which is 646, you indicated that this was not just, but this is one of the tests that looks at trauma, right?
Yes, sir. Trauma symptoms.
Right. It doesn't look at personality like the MMPI, right?
Correct.
Because MMPI stands for what? Minnesota Multi-State Personality, right?
Minnesota multiphasic personality.
Right. But the term there is personality, right? That's what it's looking at, right?
Yes.
And that's one of the most studied tests around, correct?
Yes, sir.
And is this a
think,
test that's
they
studied
can
a
hold
lot, this
the same.
TSI?
Well, a lot, yes. A lot if you're using MMPI. There's probably nothing as much as the MMPI.
Dave is going to kill me with that.
Zach stirring up trouble.
Mm.
My
This has
shock,
been pretty
you
well
can't
studied.
imagine.
And this one right here, this looks at the trauma as reported by the person who's taking the test, right?
The symptoms, yes.
Right, the symptoms that we're talking about. And some of the symptoms that you told us were what, for example?
Well, those scales would be anxious arousal, depression, defensive avoidance, dissociation, sexual arousal, depression, defensive avoidance, dissociation,
I don't know why the stream jumps back a few seconds once in a while. I'm not touching it. Racing?
We are doing nothing.
It's not me. I don't know why it behaves like this. I really don't.
sexual concerns, dysfunctional sexual behavior, and impaired self-reference. I'm assuming you're asking me for the
Sure.
clinically significant scales.
And then we have DSB here.
Yes,
What is that?
dysfunctional sexual behavior.
And for example, what do those questions ask?
In general, without giving you the type of
Well, let me help you.
unpleasant behaviors or things that they're dysfunctional, unprotected sex, too many partners, those types of things go into what would be called dysfunctional sexual behavior.
And the person who's taking the test is given a number from 0 to 3, right? To fill in.
Yes, sir.
And 0 means never, right?
Yes, sir.
And 3 means often, right?
Yes, sir.
And so, for example, in question 28 of the TSI, it asks,
Objection. Really rushed.
That's good.
Yes.
It's another sidebar. It's sidebar day in Jodi day.
Well, sometimes that you'll have that sometimes.
Now I'm fast forwarding. This is a long one. Phrasing.
Well, we've already talked about, the F scale, the P scale, and the craziness scale.
Sexual deviant scale, and the D scale,
Well,
and the F scale, and yeah.
yeah. I mean, we all know people like Jodi, women like Jodi, who are very attractive and are used to, having any guy they want, or, if they show any sort of interest, it's kind of like, well, heck yeah. She was not used to being the left behind. She was used to being the leavee. So
Yeah. Lining up the new boyfriend before breaking
yeah,
up with the old one.
you
And all of
don't.
a sudden, she met Travis, bit of a player,
Yeah,
who broke up with her and still brought her back when he needed
well,
to
yeah.
approach the D scale with the F scale.
Well, I mean, totally not a Russian bot. Most guys wouldn't, kick her out of bed for eating crackers.
I mean, there's a lot of women out there that is very jealous of her lips. And so they try to do the
Oh yeah.
vacuum cleaner thingy with various results.
It can go terribly wrong. But you don't need a deep-seated personality disorder. You just need someone who's not used to being this. And I think the state has done
So
a
you
sufficient
indicated that
job
you
of
reviewed
showing
a
that.
PSI that was administered by Dr. Karp, correct?
The report by Dr. Karp, yes.
And you indicated that the profile there, which is what we have here, right?
You have a profile
Right.
here, that is correct.
Didn't you tell us that the results in Dr. Karp's testing for the TSI were the same or consistent as what we have in 646? Didn't you tell us that?
No, I said of the scales elevated here, you have 7 that are
Right? Consistent as what we have in 646. Didn't you tell us that?
No, I said of the scales elevated here, you have 7 that are
Right.
elevated. 5 of those were the same elevations she had, according to her report. One, this intrusive, I'm touching, it's not helping you. The intrusive experiences one in her report was clinical, it's below that. And she did not indicate that either of these two, the sexual concern, I'm sorry, hit the wrong thing. Sexual concerns and dysfunctional sexual behavior, she did not indicate were in the clinical.
She didn't
range.
indicate what you're.
She did not indicate that they were in the clinical range. So it's a
So-
similar profile, but not exactly the
So
same.
you don't know what the profile was, for example, with regard to DSP?
It was below clinical.
Why don't you tell me what the number was?
I don't know. She did not report.
Well,
numbers.
where would you have that?
Where would I have it?
Yes, you
I
reviewed
would
it.
not have her number unless somebody gave me her actual results. I have her report.
So with regard to John Breer, we were talking about him. One of the things that you said that with regard to this profile that we're looking at, that this to you talks to trauma, not to personality, right? The statement from Mr. Breer, who indicates that in a psychiatric inpatient sample, TSI scales identified 89% of those independently diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Are you familiar with that?
Not offhand, I'd have to see the article or.
Sure, let me show it to you. 9% of those independently diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Are you familiar with that?
Not offhand, I'd have to see the article.
This is not me going back a few seconds. Again, it's not me. I don't know why it's doing this, but I assume it's on Wilhelm's end.
Yeah, I guess I'm still confused what he's trying to get at.
Oh yeah, I have. I think the confusion here is him trying to confuse the jury, because this guy was actually quite good on direct examination.
Yeah, I think I have many criticisms of this prosecutor, but I genuinely dislike people who waste time. And he is now wasting time. He hasn't thus far made a point that I thought, oh, I didn't know that. That's good to know. Other than, yes, and from what I've gathered from this man's trying to sidestep the issue, that his best practices is to use all of these different, corrective tools and scales. But is he trying to prove that she A, has borderline, B, doesn't have borderline, or C, that she is just, been misdiagnosed? Yeah, a wackadoo. I mean, that's basically, I dislike when people take up time and I don't have a clearer idea of what they're trying to get, because now it just seems like throwing spaghetti at the wall just to see what'll hit.
Yeah, because whatever point he is trying to make, he probably could have done that in 15 minutes or less. Now it's just
and I think
moving around, trying to confuse, trying to get to an answer he can attack. And I'm not a big fan of that tactic.
Yeah, no, he's trying to trip him up, and again, there is no basis I can understand as to why he's so irritated with this man.
Sure, let me show it to you.
Thank you.
Exhibit 652.
Yes, court reporters. Lean back, rest.
Again, could you tell me what your question was?
Are you done looking at it?
Yes, sir.
Am I going to have it back?
Yes, sir.
Doesn't he indicate under his psychometric summary that in a psychiatric inpatient sample, TSI scales, these are TSI scales, correct?
Yes, sir.
Identified 89% of those that have already been independently diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Isn't that what he says?
Well, first, no, that's not necessary. I don't know if that's.
No, sir, let's take a look at exhibit 652 and see whether or not that sentence is included there. Yes or no?
You're asking me two
No,
questions.
I'm asking you whether that sentence is there. Take a look at it.
You asked me if John Briere said that.
Well,
This is a,
let me go ahead and have it back.
excuse me.
This does talk about John Briere, PhD at the top, doesn't it?
Yes, he's the author of the test.
And it does indicate that it's copywritten, right?
Excuse me. Yes, sir.
And it talks about the validity scales of the TSI, right?
Yes, sir.
And this talks about the clinical scales, right?
Yes, sir.
It's on his letterhead, isn't it?
I thought it was on par letterhead. If you let me,
Pardon?
I thought it was on the test publisher's letterhead. I'd have to
You
look
see
again.
the letterhead there? Whose name there is there?
It's not his letterhead. It looks like his website.
It may be his website, but it is his letterhead, right?
I can't answer that yes or no. I don't really know. That doesn't look like his letterhead. It looks like his website.
Judge, I move for the admission of 652.
You may.
It's a sidebar.
Yeah, I am.
I don't understand why. I mean, the points he wanted to make is, I believe, is you are of a different opinion than Mr. March. That doesn't mean that she is wrong.
Yeah, that's
Just
kind
that
of,
you have a different approach to it, but it's not wrong. That's at least that is what I believe. And I mean, he could have done that in 15 minutes or less.
Individual John Beer. Are you denying that this publication was put out by this individual, John Beer, PhD?
I'm not denying it. I haven't seen that. It looks like it
So the
might.
answer is no, you're not denying it.
I'm not denying it, no.
So when you see the name at the top of that, you don't have any reason to have any suspicion that it was not put out by him.
Judge, may the witness actually review the entire document?
No, you can inquire on redirect. May continue.
What did you ask again? Do
You
I have any
no reason to
suspicion?
believe that this was not put out by John Breer, PhD.
I don't have reason to believe either way, actually.
So the answer is, you do have a reason to believe that he didn't put this out.
No, I can't tell you anything. I'm not familiar with that particular
And
document.
with regard to the second page, we were talking about the sentence, isn't it true that it says, similarly, in a psychiatric inpatient sample, TSI scales identified 89% of those independently diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Does that sentence exist?
Yes, sir.
And that goes against what you told us in terms of this being more of a traumatic kind of test, right?
No. You're again confusing different issues. One is you've asked me whether there's a study that supposedly exists that says it helped identify versus this test.
All right, let's
is
talk
not.
about that study. Are you saying,
Judge, he's interrupting. Can the witness finish?
let's talk about the study. Are you saying that it is your opinion that, and your opinion is the one that governs, that this does not indicate, or it has no correlation to borderline personality disorder?
The study is obviously related. It's
Yes or
about
no?
borderline personality. So it's a double negative. I can't say I don't agree that the study is about borderline when it's obviously about borderline. So I'm not sure. You worded it in a way that sounded like a double negative. So if you could clarify, I could answer.
And you were asked a double negative by defense counsel previously. Do you remember even commenting that on direct examination?
And I believe I asked to clarify.
And you had no problem answering that. Do you remember that?
No, I believe I asked to clarify and I
And you
rephrased
clarified your answer without clarifying the question. Do you remember that?
it. In that one, I was allowed to clarify.
Sir, isn't it true that you told us that in your view, there is no correlation between this, what we're looking at here, and borderline personality disorder? That's what you told us, right?
Objection, foundation as to this. What is this?
Sustained.
Exhibit number 646. You're familiar with that, right?
Yes, sir?
You were the person who laid the foundation, right?
Yes, sir?
And this is the exhibit that we've been talking about.
Yes, sir.
Were you confused about what the this was?
No, I was not.
So with regard to this particular exhibit, 646, isn't it true that you told us previously that this profile, for lack of a better term, had no correlation with borderline borderline personality disorder?
No, sir, I did not say that.
So are you saying then that it does correlate with borderline personality disorder?
No, I'm not saying either. You're asking different questions than what I answered before, and
Well,
so I can't answer it.
Let me do it this way. Are you saying then that this correlates with borderline personality disorder? Yes or no?
I'm not answering either way. I'm not saying yes or no.
You can't answer that?
Correct.
And then does that correlate with post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yes.
Even though John Breer, the person who created this test, indicates that in a sample,
Objection, asked and answered.
TSI scales identified 89% of those independently diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. You're still saying that?
Am I saying which? Yes, I'm saying that there's a study that you've quoted, I haven't seen it, but I don't dispute it, that has used this and it indicated there is a correlation, which is a separate question from saying, is this test used to diagnose borderline? Those are two separate issues.
And I'm asking you about correlation. Didn't I just ask you that? Isn't that the word that I just used?
Correct. That's the word you just used, not the word I used before.
Right, and I'm asking you the question, whether or not there was a correlation between this test and borderline personality disorder. That was the word that I used, right?
Yeah, and this study, not having read it, but this study would suggest there is.
And if that study were true then, and there is this correlation, your criticism of Janine DeMarte's work then would be less valid, right?
No, sir.
So you still stick to your criticism, even though there are studies out there that you may not be familiar with.
You're asking again two different questions.
No, that's not what I'm at. I'm asking you to answer my question. Isn't it true, sir, that even though there may be studies out there that indicate that looking at this test may be something that's important in deciding whether or not there's borderline personality disorder, you're saying you're discounting that, right?
No, the answer to the first part of your question is no. That is a completely different question, what you just stated, from what you stated after that. To say that a test, like
to say what?
To say that a test like this is used to diagnose is not what that study says, or should be used that way.
We all agree that you've said, and everybody agrees, that these tests do not you can't just use them solely to diagnose post-traumatic stress disorder, right?
Correct.
Or borderline personality disorder, right?
Correct.
That's what you said, and those are the two items that we've been talking about, right?
Yes, sir.
But when you were talking about this TSI as it applied to Janine DeMarte, one of the things that you took issue was her using that test to determine whether or not, in her mind, based on what she saw there and all the other data that she had, whether or not to her that indicated borderline personality disorder, right?
Yes, sir.
Even though there are tests out there or there are studies out there that say that there is a correlation, correct?
Objection misstates the test foundation.
There, again, you keep using different questions. There is, according to that, I haven't seen it, but according to the study that you just quoted or something, a test, I'm sorry, there's a study that indicates there's a correlation that is different from saying that test should be used to identify. Those are like apples and oranges that you keep asking me, which is why I'm having difficulty giving you a yes or no, because it's yes to one, it's no to the other.
But isn't that something to consider? If there's a test, if there's a study out there that correlates this test with borderline personality disorder, don't you think that that's part of the general intelligence out there that should be considered? Or is that?
Well, there's a correlation between PTSD and borderline.
No, I'm not asking that. I'm asking in terms of considering information out there. You're saying this information out here in 652 from John Beer should not be considered, is what you're saying, right?
No, I did not say that.
Well, if it is to be considered, then there's at least.
Did you know this, Mo?
No, I did not know, but I would not be surprised if it becomes our next June international holiday.
I just, in all this monotone wall of words, I had to thank you, Brandon, for being a bit disruptive. Thank you.
Yes.
It's an indication there that Janine DeMarte probably, or her statement that she used it in considering whether or not there was borderline personality disorder, that was appropriate.
No, it's a different issue.
So you don't think it's appropriate then to use the TSI results in trying to determine whether or not the defendant had borderline personality disorder? That's what you're saying, right?
That is what I'm saying.
Even though John Breer says something else.
No, John Breer didn't say that either.
Well, didn't John Breer say in a psychiatric inpatient
Objection.
sample?
And asked and answered.
Oh. TSI scales identified 89% of those independently diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, right?
Okay, now I get it. The comment from the creator of that test is not that it can be used to diagnose, but it has a correlation with people who already have that diagnosis when they take this test for other reasons. So this is the prosecutor, I think, actively trying to make what the author of that test is trying to make it sound different from what it actually says. So I kind of I agree with the Dr. Gaffner that.
Well, yeah, I understand that this is recross, so he's allowed to ask, short to the point answers, but this is a real pet peeve of mine, and I understand that this is just how it's set up, but when an expert would like to expound, it does bother me when they're like, they'll ask you questions again to expound.
Yeah, I'm not,
especially when you're asking disingenuous questions that make it impossible for him to answer, to look like he's a moron. Again, are you trying to make Crazy Man-Hater the psychologist that you want the jury to side with? None of this is making any sense. But I am not a strategist, so maybe he has a plan.
Well, the strategy, because this psychologist he has 35 years of experience. He's testified numerous times in trials. He knows what he's talking about. So the prosecutor's defense against that is to confuse.
Yeah.
And that's disingenuous. The prosecutor should not aim for that, especially not in a case with this much evidence.
It does say that, right?
Yes, it does.
One of the other things that you talked to us about today was this issue about the frontal lobe, right? Do you remember talking to us about that?
Yes, sir.
How many autopsies have you conducted, sir? If you could just give me, I know that it may be a lot, so just give me a ballpark figure.
No, I have not. That is not my area of expertise.
So the answer is how many?
0.
You've never gone inside the brain and taken it out and looked at it, have you?
No, sir.
Have you taken a look? Do you know what the difference is between a brain that has not decomposed and one that has decomposed? Have you ever done an autopsy to look at that?
I've never done an autopsy.
Have you ever even been at an autopsy where there was a brain that was decomposed?
I don't believe so.
And have you ever even been at an autopsy?
No, I think it was afterwards. I don't think I was at it when they were actually opening up the person.
You said something and I didn't hear what you said.
I said, I don't think I've actually been at one where they were opening. I've been at one where it was afterward, but not when they were doing it. No, sir.
And even though you have never been even to an autopsy, you feel confident in offering an opinion as to what was inside Travis Alexander's brain, right?
No, I wouldn't word it that way. I'm comfortable in talking about what the different brain functions do and what kind of damage needs to occur in order to make different statements. I'm not comfortable. I'm relying on the medical examiner's report to say what went on in the brain.
So you're saying that what is written there, you're just basically critiquing what he wrote there, right?
No, I'm assuming everything he wrote in his report is accurate.
So when he says apparent in terms of the track, because the brain was the consistency of tapioca, you're saying that you will agree with that then, right?
Yes, sir.
So if apparent, or the word that you used was
That's a notepad. It's quite impressive that he manages to keep all those notes.
apparent brain injury.
I mean, in so many. He actually is impressive in that he does all of this by himself. Imagine how much better he would have been if he, for once, had somebody beside him helping out.
That and maybe someone to say, hey, you know, I think we've gotten everything we can. You know, most teams of lawyers will say, can I have a moment? You know, make sure we've covered everything. But also to have that, hey, we're not getting anything here. Let's move on.
Yeah. Now, this part is relevant. He did
I
not
do
actually touch the brain, looked at it, it has.
Yeah, I don't know why he would opine on anything medical in that sense. It seems like that would be beyond his scope of knowledge. I don't know if psychiatrists do go in and look at diseased brains, but this seems like something that is treading on the edge of his knowledge, and this would be something. Instead of going over 950 hours of scales and stuff, this would be where I'm attacking. But I also question, again, who is the psychiatrist that you want them to listen to? And right now, it seems like you're discrediting all of the defense psychologists. So if that's his point, then that's seems what he's going for. It doesn't, in the big grand scheme of things, we have her with the gun, her with the photograph, her with everything else. I don't know that this is a loop you need to close.
Yeah.
But I have ADHD and I would be so bored right now. So I might not be the best judge of what is relevant.
It means that there has to be some skill that's applied in determining that brain injury, doesn't it?
I would assume so.
And especially because the brain was decomposed, correct?
Yes, sir.
One of the things that you also vouched or said that you thought was appropriate was this PDS. Do you remember that?
I don't think I talked about it. What was the question you asked, if I vouched for
Well,
it?
you indicated that this was a strong indication of post-traumatic stress disorder. Do you remember talking about that?
I remember talking about it's another test that does assess PTSD.
And you indicated that it didn't matter to you whether or not the trauma was caused by a bear or a tiger. Do you remember saying that?
No, I was asked if that would have changed the results, not whether it mattered to me.
You do remember the question involving a bear or a tiger, right?
Yes, sir.
What you're saying is that what's important is the report that follows it, correct?
No, you're adding words now. I didn't say what was important. I said that test assesses the reaction to the event. Important's a whole different word that I don't recall even saying.
When you says that it assesses a reaction to an event, what you're actually saying is what we have is an individual that's making a report, right?
Yes, sir.
There are no validity scales here, right?
Correct.
And we could just as well have a psychologist sitting there with a pen and pad, right? Without scripted questions, right? And say, tell me about what is ailing you, traumatically speaking, right?
And can we have a psychologist asking questions? Yes.
Sure.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
This is the same as a clinical interview because it doesn't have any validity scales, right?
Well, it's not the same. It's structured very specifically, but it does not have validity scales. That's correct.
And there's the issue of secondary gain here, right?
Yes, sir.
A person can over-report, and we don't know if they're over-reporting in this test because there's no scales to tell us either way, right?
That's correct.
And there is the issue of secondary gain then, right?
Yes, sir.
And with regard to this particular case, you're saying even though an individual may have been untruthful about the trauma, that's of no importance to you, right?
You're adding a whole bunch of words to
Is
what I
it a yes or
testified.
no? Is it of importance to you or not?
It is of importance.
So if it's of importance to you, what the answer is to what? Question 14? Is that what the one we were talking about?
I thought it was 4, and then if I remember.
You thought it was what?
question 4 tells you what you're answering the question on.
So you think question 4 is what now?
Well, in this particular one, yes, there are a bunch of things in that question that you check. The 4th item is what was checked in this scale.
But I'm asking about question 14. Do
Okay,
you know what
I'm
I'm
sorry.
talking about when I say question 14 or not?
I believe so.
And question 14 is the issue that, it's the question that has all of the writing on top, right? About the trauma, right? And it tells the person to pick the traumatic event that is most important to them, right?
Yes, sir.
And then underneath it is a bunch of choices, right?
Yes, sir.
There are bubbles underneath there, right?
Yes, sir.
And have you ever administered this PDS test?
Yes, sir.
And when was the last time you administered it?
We don't usually use it that much. I would say probably 3 or 4 years ago.
And how many times have you administered this test? You?
Quite a few before the DAPS came out. Then we switched over because it had validity scales. I couldn't tell you exactly how many, but we use that quite often.
Could it be 10 times or it could be more than that?
Oh,
I
it's
just want a ballpark figure. I'm looking to see whether or not you're familiar with the test. So are you very familiar with the test?
Not as familiar now as I was 5 years ago when we were using it more regularly. But yes, in those days, we used it regularly. I'd have to stop and think how many. I would say relatively often when we were assessing trauma.
So are you saying maybe 100 times that you
No,
administered
no,
this?
it'd probably be somewhere 20 to 40 maybe, be a
And-
rough estimate.
And the way that this works is there's a bubble sheet that's attached to it, right?
Yes, sir.
And this bubble sheet, the way it works is you give the person the test and the questions, and they're supposed to fill in the bubble sheet, right?
Objection, Judge, may we approach?
Yes.
Oh, it's a sidebar. Yeah, now I'm just playing this.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is he didn't have a clear plan of attack, or he did, and it's just, this is like wasting time. I feel like all of this could have been done in an email, like most meetings.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not. Yeah. I'm just going through the motions.
Question 14, with those multiple answers that are there, how many times did you ever fill out the answer for the client?
Not very often.
So and in the circumstances where you ever fill out the answer for the client?
Not very often.
So and in the circumstances where you filled it out, it was because they were physically unable to do it, right?
Or may have had reading or other comprehension
Right.
problems. Yes.
But if the person did not have any reading or comprehension issues, or didn't have their hands cut off, something like a physical disability, there's
I
no,
would think of it as somehow we were using it for the interview, but we didn't do that. I've not done that very
no,
often.
I'm just asking.
No.
about you.
I may have done it once or twice, but rarely.
You dropped
I may have done it once or twice as to that. I've not done that very
No,
often.
I'm just asking.
No.
about you.
I may have done it once or twice, but rarely.
You dropped
I may have done it once or twice as part of an interview.
I don't understand why it keeps jumping. Oh, it's a bit
So
irritating.
is he implying that the other psychiatrist filled out Jodi's answers?
Well, he did.
Well, there you
The
go.
male psychiatrist who was asked to leave New York because he was improper to his patients.
Oh,
But
well,
he filled out the answers while Jodi spoke, instead of letting her write down her own answers. So that
well,
is
he didn't
what
want to end up with a manifesto. Let's be real. Jodi would
Yeah.
probably fill out, make Sarah Boone look like a lightweight.
View, so I'm asking the questions
Right.
instead of them, but most often they would fill it out.
Right, which is what we just talked about, that this could be done like in an interview, right? We start.
Part of an
Sure.
interview, so I'm asking the questions
Right.
instead of them, but most often they would fill it out.
Right, which is what we just talked about, that this could be done like in an interview, right? We started out talking about this, and that's what I asked you about, and you said, yes, that's exactly what
can
we're
be,
talking
correct.
about. And what you're saying is, in this particular case, that to you, let's assume the person was untruthful as to the traumatic event. And let's assume there is no traumatic event. Assume that it doesn't exist. And yet they fill out all of the answers here. Your answer to that was, it's still valid to you, right?
I don't think I answered that question.
Well, then answer
before.
it.
I misunderstood. If I know there's no traumatic event, first, I wouldn't be giving it. Second is, then if there's no traumatic event, well, yeah, I don't know what the reason would be to give it. But if
Yeah, we have several glitches in this stream. I don't know why it occurs. Oh yeah, Socksnatcher. Thank goodness Jodi's case is done. Imagine if she and Sarah Boone were competing for attention on court TV.
I'd be willing to watch a cage match to see who wins.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
Sarah's vicious, and Jodi wouldn't have her weapons. So
I would watch a yellow pillow fight between them.
yeah, I still think Sarah would go
for scientific reasons.
Sarah would go for the jugular. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't trust her.
As long as she doesn't turn the back, she's all right.
Yeah. Sarah can't bring her suitcase. Jodi can't bring her knife and force multiplier.
Yeah.
somebody somehow had no traumatic event and they did fill this out and you got these results, I'd need to go back and explore why they're responding the way they did.
And this is, again, could be just like sitting down and talking to the client, right? In other words,
Yes.
this could be conducted with an individual and just asking the questions and you could write the answers, right?
Yes, sir.
It's because there are no validity scales, right?
Yes, sir.
And assuming that you were conducting this interview and you were talking to this person and this person was untruthful to you during that interview, wouldn't that raise a red flag to you? If you're sitting down and talking to an individual, wouldn't that at least raise a red flag to you?
Objection beyond scope.
Overruled.
Yes.
Sir, one of the other things that you talked about, let me show you some exhibits. Take a look at exhibits numbers 654 and 653. And you just look at them yourself.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with those photographs?
No, sir.
I thought you just testified and told us about Dr. Horn having, in your opinion, not being accurate with regard to Mr. Alexander and whether or not he received a injury to the frontal lobe.
You're asking two questions. You asked me
Well,
about
I'm
the
asking you,
medical-
are you familiar with that, first of all? Yes or no?
These pictures?
You're
No.
right.
No,
Have
sir.
you ever seen them before?
I don't believe so.
And those photographs that you are looking at, they generally depict the inside of an individual's skull, right?
Yes, sir.
They also have some arrows there, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you know what those arrows mean?
No, not without the report or explanation.
And in fact, those arrows point to...
Objection, hearsay, testimony.
Overruled.
No, not without the report or explanation.
And in fact, those arrows point to...
Objection, hearsay, testimony.
Overruled.
I apologize.
Don't they point to that skull? Yes or
I
no?
can't do anything about
They
it.
point to
Don't
inside the
hold them up.
skull.
Just
Oh,
look at them yourself.
yes, they point inside the skull.
In your experience, sir, given your experience as a neuropsychologist, can you tell us the trajectory of the bullet based on those photographs? That
Objection beyond scope. Beyond expertise.
overruled.
Yeah, that's That should be overruled because he did testify about
Yeah, why did he
how
do
the bullet
that?
traveled through the brain. And she did put him on to testify about it.
Why it was?
Kids, Mama Mo will soon throw a sandal at you. We have less than 10 minutes to go. So these streams are on Saturdays are often less than 2 hours. So I will, in the next natural ending point, we will do an off and I will send you off to Excited Utterance birthday stream. Now that doesn't go on until 6 p.m. Eastern time, but you can press the subscribe button and you can press the bell thingy so you get notified when that starts.
Yes.
Now I don't have access to Dave's channel, so I can't redirect that one.
No, not likely without more explanations.
Well, no, but you couldn't do it, right?
No,
You would go to an expert, wouldn't you?
or I'd read the medical examination report.
You have read the medical examiner's report in this case, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
If I tell you that this is Mr. Alexander's skull opened up, can you tell me the trajectory just by looking at that?
No, I would rely on what the report said, not on those particular photos. I would go, if I want to know the trajectory of, then I would read what the examiner said was the trajectory, and I would trust that that was accurate.
So what you're saying then is that you are only here to tell us what you read in a report, right?
Well, two things.
Yes or no? Are you here to tell us something else?
Yes.
But that knowledge that you have, or what you're here to tell us, is based solely on what's on that police report, right?
You mean medical examiner?
I'm sorry, the medical examiner's report, right?
No, because part of it is based completely on that. The other part was talking about the brain itself, not based on a report, was talking about how the brain functions. So there's two different things I did.
But that's your experience, though. That's what you carry with you everywhere you go, right?
Yes, sir.
And the only new thing that's added here is the report, right?
Yes, sir.
And so you're telling us that what your opinion as a neuropsychologist is based on a reading of a report, correct?
And my knowledge of the brain.
And your knowledge of the brain, and you've indicated that if you really wanted more explanation as to this particular issue, you would go to an expert yourself, wouldn't you?
Yes, sir.
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Redirect.
He is just an angry little...
all of that cross-examination for the final point that if you wanted to know more, you would go to an expert, indicating this guy is not an expert, even though he was called as an expert by the defense.
Burn. Total burn.
Yeah, but taking 4 hours to get there, seriously.
Well, I mean, he could have done better time management. Also,
Yeah.
Again, I want to know what you're trying to prove here, that the defense got stupid experts who don't know what they were talking about, trust the state's experts, or you think that the other expert didn't do a good work. And again, I fail to understand what the point was.
Yeah, the point was his final words here. If you needed more information, he showed him the skull pictures, I assume. That is the extra information. But then he would have called an expert. That was the whole point of it, that this neuropsychologist would have called another person for more to handle that extra information. I don't know. I assume his extra point was to confuse the jury, because this guy did quite well on the stand, on direct. But yeah, that was a natural cutoff point. Thank you, Mo, for filling in for Dave.
No problem.
Next Saturday or the Saturday after that, we will continue with this extraordinary witness. And me and Dave have planned it out so that we will do the final stream in his treehouse around August 23, I believe.
Cool deal.
Yeah. So everybody, thank you for showing up. Thank you to Mo. Everybody go
Thank
subscribe to Mo. And you're off to Hella, Excited Utterance.
Yes. And if you, excuse me, want to have Legal Shenanigans Theater Unleashed, I will be doing a Rumble exclusive with Veilhammer at 3 because this interrogation is epic, but YouTube doesn't like any of the things that are done. So, and then tomorrow I will at 3 p.m. have a dramatic enactment of Sarah Boone's latest manifesto.
Oh, that will be epic. But thank you, everybody. See you later on the Serial Killers Saturday stream and then over at Hella. Okay? Oh, Mo, you have seen the new intro/outro, have you?
I vaguely remember it, but I probably don't. That's
Here
my
it comes.
professional answer.
In a little town where things aren't what they seem, there lived a girl named Jodi with a tricky little scheme. She went to the courtroom where she told a little lie, but the truth came out. Oh my, it wasn't ninjas or pirates, as she tried to claim. Jodi was the culprit, she was the one to blame. But in this silly town,